A dealer named Turanius became wealthy in the late Republic by specializing in delicier procurement for elite clients. His business records, fragments of which survived in legal disputes after his death, reveal a sophisticated operation. Agents throughout the Mediterranean identified promising acquisitions. Subjects were purchased young and trained in specialized facilities. The training included what records euphemistically call education in the arts of pleasing. Elite buyers would visit Turanius's private showrooms where slaves were displayed in ways emphasizing the qualities being sold. The viewing process was hands-on. Buyers were encouraged to inspect thoroughly to verify merchandise met their requirements. The slaves being inspected had no rights, no voice, no recourse. They were products being evaluated by consumers. The prices for delicier vastly exceeded ordinary slave prices. A skilled agricultural worker might cost 2,000 sesterces. A beautiful youth with appropriate training might cost 200,000. The investment indicated the purpose. No one paid that premium for someone to clean floors. What became of delicier slaves as they aged reveals the system's full cruelty. Youth and beauty fade. Slaves purchased for these qualities lost value rapidly. Some were resold at declining prices. Some were freed, cast out with minimal resources to survive. Some simply disappeared from records. Their fates unmentioned because mentioning them would require acknowledging what they'd been purchased for originally. The children born to delicier slaves faced particular complications. Roman law made children of slaves the property of their mother's owner. This meant children fathered by elite men on their own slaves were themselves slaves owned by their own fathers. Some such children were freed and acknowledged. Many more were sold, given away, or disposed of in ways leaving no record. This brings us to one of Rome's darkest practices, infant exposure. Roman law permitted fathers to reject newborn children. A baby could be placed outside the household, exposed to the elements and whatever fate might follow. The practice was called exposition, and it was legal, common, and horrifying. Elite families practiced exposure primarily for daughters and for children born with visible defects. A son was valuable, he continued the family name, inherited property, participated in politics. A daughter required a dowry, and too many daughters could strain even wealthy families. The calculus was financial. Children who cost more than they contributed weren't worth raising. The exposed children didn't necessarily die. Slave traders knew where to find them. Abandoned infants, if they survived their first hours, became property of whoever collected them. The traders raised these foundlings specifically for the delicier market. Children without family, without identity, without anyone to object to their treatment, were ideal raw material for training in whatever arts buyers required. A legal case from the 1st century concerns a woman who recognized her own daughter being sold in a slave market 20 years after exposing her. The daughter had been collected as an infant, raised by traders, trained for specific purposes, and was being offered for sale when her mother happened to attend the market. The legal question was whether the mother had any claim to her daughter. The court ruled she did not. Having abandoned the child, she'd forfeited all parental rights. The daughter remained merchandise. Archaeological evidence from Roman sites includes infant remains in locations inconsistent with normal burial practices, trash heaps, latrine pits, drainage systems. These locations suggest disposal rather than burial, abandonment rather than death from natural causes. The scale of remains indicates exposure was not rare but routine. Elite participation in exposure was masked by intermediary involvement. Midwives handled actual exposure. Slave traders handled collection. The family patriarch simply made a decision and delegated implementation. His hands remained clean. His conscience remained unburdened. The child simply disappeared, becoming someone else's problem, someone else's property, someone else's product. But exposure was passive cruelty. What elite families did actively to eliminate rivals involved far more deliberate methods. Every elite Roman household contained poisons, rat poison, pest control, medical compounds that could kill in wrong doses. The presence of toxic substances was normal. What wasn't normal but was pervasive was the sophisticated poison networks connecting elite households through shared knowledge of how to use these substances against human targets. A woman named Locusta became Rome's most famous poisoner during Nero's reign. She prepared the mushrooms that killed Emperor Claudius and the poison that killed Britannicus. But Locusta was only the most famous practitioner of an art pervading elite society. Her skills were exceptional. Her willingness to use them was entirely typical. Elite women were particularly associated with poison knowledge. Medical preparation was considered a feminine domestic art. The same skills producing healing compounds could produce lethal ones. A matron who understood herbs well enough to treat her family's illnesses understood them well enough to end inconvenient lives. A woman named Sacia was prosecuted in 79 BC for allegedly poisoning multiple husbands. The prosecution was led by Cicero, whose speech against her provides detailed evidence of how poison networks operated. Sacia allegedly consulted specialists, obtained compounds through intermediaries, tested dosages on slaves, and administered fatal doses through contaminated food and drink. Whether Sacia was actually guilty remains uncertain. What is certain is that the network Cicero described the specialists and intermediaries and testing protocols existed and was accessible to anyone with money and connections. The poison networks crossed household boundaries through shared servants and shared suppliers. A slave purchased from one elite household and resold to another might carry knowledge of what happened in the first household. Suppliers who provided compounds to one family knew who else was buying. The information was valuable and traded accordingly, but poison was merely one tool for eliminating problems. Elite Romans had access to methods that were crueler and more deliberate. Roman law granted paterfamilias, male heads of households, absolute power over their families and slaves. This power included the right to punish without external oversight. What happened within household walls was literally no one else's business. The punishments inflicted in elite households ranged from beatings, which were routine, to torture, which was common, to killing, which was legal if the victim was a slave. Vedius Pollio's lamprey pond was unusual only in its theatrical nature. Other households maintained their own facilities for punishing slaves' facilities, serving purposes beyond mere discipline. A letter from Pliny the Younger describes visiting a friend's winter villa and hearing sounds from a wing of the house that the host dismissed as domestic matters. The sounds, Pliny notes without elaboration, continued throughout the evening. The host seemed entirely unconcerned. Other guests ignored what they heard. Pliny himself mentions it only in passing, as though unremarkable. The training of punishment specialists was a recognized profession.